Welcome back to Josh Bearhart's Reading Room. I'm Josh Bearhart Hawk, and I'm author of the journal GPS Signal Lost and Legends and Tales, Creepy and Fun Stories to Tell Around the Campfire. And today we are continuing with the journal. We only have a couple of chapters left. We're getting the real meaty point of the story, and we've had a lot of new stuff come to light in the last couple of chapters. And in the last 3 chapters, we're going to have just a lot of crazy stuff happening. So, with that being said, if this is the first video you've clicked on, go watch the playlist, wherever YouTube links the playlist. I'll put the playlist in. You can start from chapter 1 and watch all the way through. And that way you can be caught up with the story and you know what's going on as we start to tie everything together. So let's go ahead and jump right into chapter 21 today. Chapter 21 is titled Gone. Samantha's head was spinning. Even hours later, she still couldn't believe she was pregnant. She probably wouldn't have believed it fully if not for the ultrasound. She wasn't more than 9 weeks along, maybe a little less. There was only one person who could be the father, but she had no way to tell him in the moment. Laying in the hospital bed, every emotion going through her all at once, she barely noticed someone coming through the door late in the afternoon. "Miss Samantha, I don't know if you remember me from this morning. It's Deputy Ryan. I have just a few questions for you about the place you said Heath was going, if you don't mind." "Of course, Deputy. Did you manage to get out there? Is Heath okay?" Her voice was hoarser than it had been when he first visited. "I made it out there just after dawn, following the directions you provided. The gate was rusted out and wide open, and the house, well, it just wasn't there. It's clear there was a house there at one point, but there's nothing there now," he said, his tired eyes meeting hers. "No, you must have been in the wrong place. The house was big. There's no way it could have vanished." "The thing is, I did a little digging when I got back, looking through some old case files and whatnot. That location seemed rather familiar to me. Then I remembered where I'd heard about it. My old sergeant, the guy who trained me, took me out there when I first joined as a sort of training run. He told me all about it, but none of what he had said stuck until I found that file this morning. That place burned down in 1935, right after the old guy who owned it kicked the bucket. At the time, it was ruled an arson, but they never caught who did it. Many people assumed it was some kids out having too much fun, but there were rumors the former owner had made some serious enemies over his life, and they wanted to erase anything the man had ever worked for. I don't know what the truth is, but I do know that property has sat abandoned for almost 30 years. Samantha was speechless. She and Heath had just been in the house a couple of days before. Heath was still there. The deputy had to be mistaken or lying to her. "There's just no way. Heath's out there. You must have gone to the wrong place." She started to panic and try to get out of bed. Before she could get out of bed completely, the doctor and nurse came into the room and settled her down with a dose of medicine, and she drifted off to sleep again. Dreams of Heath filled her head for a brief time, and for a brief time she was happy and the world was perfect. Just her, Heath, and their baby. That was all she needed. Sunshine on her eyelids brought her back to the real world. As she woke, she found herself still in the hospital and still hooked up to the IV. Looking around the room, she found she was alone once more. What if what the deputy had said was true? There had to be some other explanation. Houses didn't just appear and disappear, and people like Heath didn't just vanish. She had to get back out there and see for herself. "The best thing you can do is get some rest and heal up. You can, of course, refuse further treatment, but that would be ill-advised. If not for your sake, think of the baby." The doctor was checking her vitals as he spoke, and writing them on his clipboard. "The baby will be fine. I need to get out of here and find his father. Give me whatever paperwork I need to sign. I'm refusing treatment," she said, pushing herself to a sitting position. "All right, I'll send in the nurse with the forms," he said, turning and walking back out of the room. Within a few minutes, the nurse had returned with a stack of paperwork for Samantha to read and sign. It took longer than she wanted, but when everything was signed, she was allowed to walk out on her own. The splint on her leg hindered her slightly, but she walked out into the afternoon sun with a look of determination on her face. "Need a lift?" Deputy Ryan was sitting in his patrol car just outside the hospital door. She climbed in the car and they set off for the Asphodel Estates. Samantha fully expected the gate and house to still be there, assuming the deputy had just turned off on the wrong road when he had visited. As they approached the road she knew to be the right one, she expected the deputy to keep driving, but instead he slowed down and made the turn. Creeping along the gravel drive, her stomach began to twist in knots. As they rounded the turn where the gate had been, she thought she was going to be sick at the sight of the rusted iron no longer blocking the path. Deputy Ryan kept looking over at her, expecting her to tell him he had the wrong road or that she didn't recognize anything, but she just kept staring blankly out the windshield. As the car rounded the final turn, Samantha's hands covered her mouth and tears streamed down her cheeks. The house was gone. Climbing out of the car as it came to a stop, she hobbled up to what was left of the foundation. A tree marked where the foyer had been, and overgrowth now covered what had been the stairs. The gardens were no longer filled with exotic plants, and Heath was nowhere to be found. Heath hesitated before plunging his hand into the hole in the wall. He had been instructed to look under the Delaware River for the key to solving the mystery, and that clue pointed him to a painting in the office. The effort required to remove Mr. Washington from the wall was more than Heath expected, but it was worth it when he saw what was hidden behind it. Feeling around, his hand landed on what felt like a small box at the bottom of the opening. Pulling the box out, he discovered it was covered in dust and had intricate carvings resembling those that he had seen in books depicting Greek architecture all around the house. Pausing for a moment to admire the craftsmanship, he lifted the lid to reveal a single key laying in the bottom of the small container. The old, rusty key felt somehow familiar to him as he picked it up and moved it around with his hand. It was heavier than it looked and was ice cold to the touch. The top of it looked like a skull, and the bottom half had an odd-looking double hook meant to fit inside an old-style lock. Setting the box down on the desk and grabbing a flashlight from one of the desk drawers, Heath made his way from the office, through the halls of the mansion, finally stopping in front of the basement door. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door and made his way down the stairs, back into the dimly lit basement. Crossing the room, he came once more to the mystery door. 3 locks lined the right side, guarding whatever secrets lay behind the solid wood structure. His hand was shaking as he raised the skeleton key to the first lock, inserting it and slowly turning until he heard the distinctive clicking of the mechanism unlocking. Removing the key, he inserted it into the next lock, again turning until it too was unlocked. Taking a deep breath, he moved the key into the final lock and turned. As the last mechanism opened, the door creaked free and began to swing toward him. He knew there was no turning back now. Making his way through the portal into the darkness, he felt as if he had stepped into a different world. The ambient sounds he was used to hearing in the house disappeared, and the silence of the space seemed impenetrable. The damp smell from the basement was replaced with a sweet smell that reminded Heath of lilacs. Turning on his flashlight, he made his way deeper into the tunnel. The passage seemed to stretch on for miles with no end in sight. After more than an hour, he reached a junction and he had to decide which way he wanted to go. The sound of something creaking down the tunnel to his left helped him make up his mind. Following the sound, he wandered on for what felt like another couple of hours. Just when he was contemplating turning around and going back to the junction, he came out of the tunnel and into a large room. Shining the flashlight around revealed he was standing in a circular room about 20 feet high and 20 feet across. In the center of the room sat what appeared to be a sarcophagus, and an opening on the opposite side of the room from him seemed to contain some stairs. Walking around the space, Heath noticed engravings on the walls that seemed to depict some kind of sacrifice. Approaching the sarcophagus in the middle of the room, he found a name etched in the stone: Mark Appleton. A creaking sound to his left caught Heath's attention, and he turned his head and flashlight just in time to see some dirt falling from the ceiling. Walking over to get a closer look, he spotted a crack in the stone that seemed to be pouring out dirt. Before he knew what was happening, the ceiling began to fall. He didn't have time to move before a large rock came down on him, crushing his leg and pinning him to the ground. Other stones and more dirt came down, covering his light and making it hard to breathe. As the sound of the collapse subsided, Heath found himself in the dark and in the most pain he had ever felt. His last thought before passing out was of Samantha and hoping she could forgive him. The sunlight streaming in the office window brought a smile to Heath's face. He was lying on the couch, having slept in the office yet again. But now the morning was calling. The smell of coffee filled his nose, and he imagined Samantha was probably preparing to walk in and yell at him about staying overnight here instead of at home. As he opened his eyes and sat up, a feeling of dread filled him. This wasn't right. He had just been in a crypt, hadn't he? How did he get back in the office? As he opened his eyes and sat up, a feeling of dread filled him. Standing up, he went out and checked the main lobby for any sign of Samantha or anyone else. A brief search revealed he was alone, though the coffee maker was brewing a pot of coffee on its own. Stepping outside, he found more of the same solitude. No people to be seen on a busy street, no cars passing by, no birds tweeting. This didn't make any sense. Making his way down the street, he spent the next hour peering in shop windows and looking for anyone at all to explain what was going on. Finding no one, he returned to the office and grabbed a cup of coffee before taking a seat at his desk. There had to be some kind of logical explanation for all this. He remembered the pain of the rocks falling on him, the cold feeling right before passing out. Was he dead? If this was the afterlife, he wasn't impressed. As he sat there sipping his cup of coffee, he instinctively reached up to the top drawer of the desk and pulled out a case file. Opening it, he began reading the details of a missing pocket watch that the client claimed could turn back time. The client's name was Theodore Johnson, and he had visited the office a few days prior to ask Heath for help. It was Samantha's last day before a short vacation back to Colorado to see her family, so Heath offered to handle the details so she could leave early. Now, as he sat behind the desk, looking over the case file, finding the watch was the only thing he could think about. A weird feeling in the back of his mind told him that he had just been doing something else, but he couldn't remember what. The feeling faded more and more as he got to work, and by nightfall, he had tracked down some possible locations for the watch. Resolving to look more into it in the morning, Heath left the office and drove home to sleep in his own bed for a change. Traffic seemed much lighter than he expected, but maybe it was a holiday or something he'd overlooked. As he climbed into bed, he felt like he had accomplished a lot that day, and he was looking forward to solving the case in the next couple of days and telling James all about it over beer. So it's chapter 21, and we're starting to kind of really unravel some of the mystery and what exactly has been going on for the entire time, especially for Josh. But we'll find out more about that in the next 2 chapters. So make sure that you like and subscribe. If you want to see the next chapter, if you're watching this as it first comes out on YouTube, you can go over to Patreon and you can check out the next chapter. They release a week early over there for patrons. There's also some behind-the-scenes stuff and some other stuff pertaining to the books and the writing process in general and that kind of thing. I am going to be doing a retrospective on the journal. When I'm done with it, I'm going to do that with all of my books, covering basically my thoughts, how the book came to be, that kind of stuff. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of it. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.